We're back, and we are discussing tonight Egypt's foreign policy and international relations. And we do have with us here Dr. Hossam Allam, the international relations researcher. Dr. Allam, as we spoke, as you saw, with His Excellency Ambassador Orabi, and talking also about the national dialogue that kicked off earlier in the day, we see that Egypt foreign policy is stemming with a diversified overlook and achieving a lot throughout the past 5 years. So the outcome is actually very fruitful.
That's very true. Let me start here with a very interesting fact that almost all the academic literature on international relations tends to agree on, and the fact goes as follows. It's almost like even has come to be figured out and seen and perceived as a saying of wisdom, and that's, from a realist perspective, all the imbalances of the balance of power worldwide tend to be resolved within the region of the Middle East. This, by default, takes us to a very important and significant conclusion, and I do think that it is safe to state that it has been Egypt's destiny and fate to always be in the focus of all attempts of all world parties and stakeholders to seek Egypt as an integral force in the region of the Middle East that has to be reckoned with and cannot be disregarded or done away with.
Yes.
So in light of all what I have just mentioned, we can see how is it Egypt has always been facing many posed challenges, be they regionally, be they internationally, and this is why, given, as you mentioned earlier in the very interesting introduction that you shared with us, that for all of these historical, cultural reasons that have to do with religion, reasons that have to do with economy, all of this, all these strategic factors, they pose a challenge to the Egyptian state, and it has always been the case across the centuries, if not even, I would even elaborate further and say that this even go beyond the recent history and even all history wide. So this is why, given all of these challenges, definitely we can have a clearer perspective as we look into the strategy of Egypt's foreign policy, of Egypt's diplomacy, because definitely a very influential power in the region is definitely Egypt. And this is a fact that definitely all our scholars tend to agree on, that any international relations expert or strategist, whenever they are trying to figure out how to make the equations work as far as the Middle East is concerned and beyond, definitely Egypt has to be part of this equation. And this can actually explains to us, as you mentioned earlier, for instance, the visit of the Japanese Prime Minister and so many other visits.
Yes.
Because definitely all these powers, they definitely have a great interest in the Middle East. And this is why they have to understand and take into consideration that the gate to this is Egypt and building healthy relations with Egypt. And this is why what I do think that the Egyptian foreign ministry and diplomacy has always been taking into consideration and has always been playing a constructive role in maintaining these bridges based on mutual respect, based on the principles of international, public international law, and also while maintaining the interests of the Egyptian state and the people of Egypt.
Yes, as you've wisely said, and that's why Egypt has managed through its diversified foreign policy to regain its leading role.
Yes.
And we can see this also in more than one, reflected in more than one important visit by the president.
Exactly.
To more than one country abroad. And also we can see how Egypt is looked upon as a heavyweight country.
Definitely.
When, as you've wisely mentioned, Kishida's visit, the Japanese Prime Minister,
Yes.
Fumio Kishida, was on a very important tour to the Middle East region. And this tour, the first leg of a week-long tour actually, to 4 African countries, this in addition to Singapore, while he chose the first stop to be Egypt. And guess what? It comes timely because this important tour also happens before he is scheduled to host the Group of 7 summit soon. So a very important African tour, and we can find that the first stop is Egypt. So definitely, Dr. Allam, this gives a great reflection of Egypt's heavyweight in the region.
Definitely. It sends a message. It signals how a country like Japan, being located in a very also hot-spotted part of the world, because you have Japan, you have China, you have Russia there. So when we see a country like Japan trying to also play a role on the global stage, definitely on a visit like this to the Middle East and to the African continent, I do think that Egypt is well posed on Japan's, let's say, world map as far as the world. The world is very important part, which is the Middle East region, is concerned.
Yes. Well, this is a very important visit by His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Japan, and we can see more than one direction and more than one dimension. I guess it was an international scene, actually, seeing him at GEM, the Grand Egyptian Museum, this amazing, fascinating scene, which is going to be actually amazing. All the tourists and also foreign friends whom you know are always asking when is the inauguration of GEM and when are we expecting to have GEM open to the public and for visitors as well. So this has been actually a scene, as we can see it here, a scene with pride with His Excellency Prime Minister of Egypt, Dr. Mustafa Madbouli, and wow, we can see here the great Ramses the second in the background. So this is a scene that would definitely reflect also the link between politics and also soft power.
Exactly.
How can soft power serve our foreign relations? Such a scene actually that has been on TVs worldwide, marketing not only, of course, Egypt's foreign policy, but also marketing our GEM, our history, Grand Egyptian Museum, culture, our history and our civilization, and our culture. So how do you see that? I guess it was really fascinating to see this scene happening.
Definitely branding and image building and construction as far as diplomacy is concerned is a very key instrument that all states tend and always have to pursue in order to be able to utilize it as a means of diplomacy, as a means of soft power diplomacy here, I mean in this regard in particular, in order to promote a positive image. And here it serves a very important interest, as a matter of fact, for the Egyptian state, and that's to send a clear message that Egypt is stable, Egypt is safe, it's open to receive world friends from all over the world, while at the same time sending the message that Egypt is open for receiving foreign investments, and still Egypt is able to maintain a balanced stance, and that's with regards to maintaining its historical identity, as long with building a country that keeps up with technology, that keeps up with modernity, and all of this, I do think that it's very wise, because Egypt has, as a matter of fact, especially over the recent period, the Egyptian foreign ministry and the Egyptian foreign diplomacy, I do think that has managed to strike a balance when it comes to the utilization of a combination of what we describe in international relations or the IR literature as smart power, and that's a combination of hard power as well as soft power. So to maintain this balance, to be able to say that yes, I can protect my borders, and I can even draw lines, clear lines, when my strategic depth is threatened. This is definitely very important, and it is very important to have a clear say on this regard, as well as I just have mentioned, being able to present the image of the country in a light that's attractive to both the peoples of the world as well as the heads of state in these countries.
Yes, definitely very strong relations and a very solid foundation and partnership with our dear friendly nation, Japan. I had all the honor of meeting His Excellency Ambassador Oka Hiroshi, Ambassador of Japan to Cairo. His Excellency told me that he was very much delighted to take our relations into a more strategic partnership and into more levels. So let us say that the sky is the limit, always with Japan. Let's see right now excerpts of His Excellency Oka Hiroshi's Ambassador of Japan to Cairo. He's exclusive with Nile TV International. Your Excellency, it has been, as you've mentioned, a long-standing friendship and cooperation with Japan. The field of archaeology, definitely we're all awaiting the inauguration of GEM and more.
Yes, of course. As Dr. Howard mentioned during his speech, one of the main item of the contributions, in addition to the renovation of the artifact of Tutankhamun, is the renovation of the second solar boat of King Khufu. So everything which we supported for the constructions of the Grand Egyptian Museum is going to be exhibited for everyone to see. So we are very much excited and looking forward to the opening of the Grand Egyptian Museum.
Definitely. Also, Your Excellency, we're talking the cooperation with Egypt in the field of tourism, and the sky is always the limit.
Yes, of course. In spite of the distance between the two countries, Japanese tourists are eager and looking forward to come to Egypt to cover all the attractive, the values that Egypt offers for the tourists. So we are looking forward to many of the Japanese tourists coming to Egypt.
Yes. Special relations, thank you Yasser Nabil for the distinctive promo, and this is the first time for a Japanese Prime Minister to visit Egypt since January 2015, when the late Shinzo Abe had paid a visit to the country. So a very distinctive African tour, telling us and reflecting more on Egypt's weight, Dr. Allam. As you've said, the different countries resort to more than one power while marketing their diplomacy. And talking about the term smart power, how can it be utilized in the world of today, the world of international relations today?
Let me state at the outset that when it comes to international relations, actually it is not far from how people conduct their relations on a day-to-day basis, or as far as their daily affairs are concerned. So even when it comes to how each normal human beings they tend to conduct their daily affairs. They cannot just rely on one way of handling their affairs or tackling their daily concerns. So looking at this variable here and looking at how international relations are conducted, this is also the case. A country cannot solely rely, for instance, on hard power alone to deal with its counterparts, be it on the regional level or beyond when it comes to the global stage. This is why recently, and there has been now a growing literature on the concept of smart power, and that's how to strike a balance as to how these two forms of power are utilized in order to best serve the interest of a state or a nation. And that's how to maintain a balance between the utilization of hard power, which by default means the military power, and the hard power when it comes to military equipment, and when it comes to soft power, which has to do with diplomacy, diplomatic relations, embassies, and all of this. So I do think that when we look at the example of Egypt, we have an example that's really worthy of being reflected on and taken into consideration. As far as I can see it, it is safe to state that it has been a successful example of maintaining this balance, of sending a clear message that Egypt has a very clear image and view when it comes to protecting its security interests in the region, especially given and in view of how challenging all of these unfolding circumstances when you look at the Arab-Israeli conflict. On one border, we have Libya, and how that it has been a hotspot over the recent more than 10 years. Now we have another front with all what is going on in the Sudan. So all of these, and we have two large adjacent water borders given the Middle East and the Red Sea. So all of these are very strategic interests that pose, I mean, maintaining them safe and secure definitely poses a great challenge to the Egyptian state, and still, thankfully, it has been successful in maintaining their safety and maintaining their security. And when we look also, as an example of the visit of the Japanese Prime Minister, of maintaining this soft power diplomacy and maintaining diplomatic ties and relations. And this, as a matter of fact, has always been, I would say, a salient and characteristic feature of Egypt's foreign policy and diplomacy. If we look, for example, all the way back to the non-aligned movements, all the way back to the the former Egyptian President Jamal Abdel Nasser, how that he is the one who formed and played a pivotal role in forming the non-alignment movement, and it was definitely a smart move, sending a clear message that Egypt is always seeking to maintain a balanced approach and always be a neutral major power in the region, and that it respects the principles of international relations and public international law, especially with regards to non-interference or non-intervention or non-meddling with the internal affairs of other countries. So definitely this is very important.
Yes, it is. And as His Excellency the President held talks last Sunday with Prime Minister of Japan, Kishida, where the two leaders had affirmed the importance of universal values such as maintaining the international order based on the rule of the law. As Dr. Allam has said, the President and the Japanese Prime Minister, as the letter said, that he agreed with the President on the need to boost relations between the two countries on the level of strategic partnership. And strategic partnership, the level of strategic partnership definitely influences the current situation, it has more than one dimension here. It means a very, very strong foundation.
Definitely is. Yeah, because here when we are speaking of strategic partnership, we are talking about not only dealings and exchange of interests that has to do only with the near future, but we are talking about a further plans that go beyond the near future. And I think this is very important given Egypt's population, given Egypt's potential to provide a thriving environment and a promising environment for foreign investment, especially in light of all the continuous efforts of the Egyptian state in order to provide a safe haven for foreign investment and to attract foreign investors. So definitely this sends a message of the fact that a country and the government like the Japanese government sees it befitting for its foreign agenda interests to take this step and to show its willingness and readiness to strike such deals with the Egyptian state. This definitely sends and tells us, and it demonstrates how Egypt is working continuously in order to be a strategic partner that's worthy of the confidence and that's worthy of attracting the investment of such very important and significant world players like the state of Jeddah.
Yes, well, more than one important significance actually of the visit. Let's look at the upcoming report that highlights more on how Egypt invests in its foreign relations. Stay tuned.
Foreign policy is an essential component of Egypt's general state strategy. It serves its goals and objectives, particularly in the areas related to diplomatic functions, together with its traditional diplomatic and political purposes, and given that development policy is considered a key objective, Egypt's foreign relations participate in the country's development effort by trying to attract foreign investment, obtain economic assistance, and facilitate technology transfer. Egyptian diplomacy also seeks to maintain strong bilateral and multilateral relations, which are among the essential goals of Egypt's general policy. Egypt's relations with the outside world also seeks to maintain strong bilateral and multilateral cooperation, which is another essential goal of Egypt's general policy, strengthening traditional friendly relations as well as building new foreign relations, enabling Egypt to exercise influence and pursue its national interests all over the globe. Traditional relations, such as those with African and Arab countries, are maintained primarily through interaction within regional organizations, such as the African Union and the Arab League. Bilateral relations with Arab and African countries are also promoted through continuous consultations, widening the scope of cooperation in various fields and exchanging expertise in the different areas of development. Egypt has played and still plays a leading role in supporting Arab policies, foremost among which are those concerning issues such as the Arab-Israeli conflict, Iraq, and Sudan. Egypt's foreign policy is also committed to boosting the state's strategic relations, such as those with the US, Europe, Asia, and the Far East, which helps Egypt in its sustainable development efforts and promotes its role in the international arena, as well as serving its strategic regional objectives. On a bilateral level, Egypt has active relations with most European countries, including those of the Mediterranean. What enables Egypt to keep promoting its foreign relations has been its steadfast insistence on the principles of mutual respect and equality in all its foreign dealings, and in its staunch opposition to outside meddling in other countries' domestic affairs and attempts to infringe on their sovereignty and independence. Egypt is also a strong advocate of peace and stability in its regional environment, towards which end it promotes a spirit of cooperation, the adherence to the principles of international law, the commitment to international treaties and covenants, and support for UN organizations and international cooperation and mutual support.
Talking international relations, how Egypt is also a strong advocate of peace and stability in the region, adhering to the principles of international law and the commitment also to international treaties. Well, Egypt's regional role has been outlined by His Excellency at the beginning of the episode, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Ambassador Orabi, and as His Excellency has mentioned that we are always opening doors, always supporting our neighbors and the different states also. Concerning ensuring the sense of security in the region and stability, we always find, Dr. Allam, that Egypt is playing a pivotal role in that respect.
That's very true. And if we look, for example, at one of the very persistent issues that was highlighted in the report, and that's as far as the Arab-Israeli conflict is concerned, Egypt has always maintained a clear stance that it supports a peaceful solution that ensures the historical and humanitarian rights of the people of Palestine. When we look, for example, at the situation in Iraq, Egypt has always been trying to a stabilizing factor at this very hot spot of the Arab world. When we look also at the unfolding situation in Libya, and especially given the very strategic borders that Egypt holds with the Libyan state, Egypt has always been involved in the peace talks and has hosted many events and summits in order to ensure that stability is restored and that the people of Libya can be saved and protected from the woes and distress of war. The very recent unfolding situation and the ensued circumstances in the Sudan, and how is it this adds on to the challenges posed, as a matter of fact, to the state of Egypt. Egypt has made it clear that it is calling all concerned parties for the restoration of peace and stability and the stop of any further blood shedding in the Sudan. It has made it clear that it will do its best to open its borders in order to provide a safe haven for comers from the state of the Sudan. So all this shows how Egypt has been consistent with its stance when it comes to not interfering in a malicious way in the affairs of its border or close by countries, as well as other countries in the Middle East. And this is why I do think that this is something that has always been appreciated by fellow Arab countries. This is why whenever there is a summit, definitely in a country like Iraq recently, in Jordan, definitely Egypt is part and parcel of the concerned parties on the table of negotiations and peace talks and development efforts, as well as when it comes to the concerned international organizations that concern the Middle East and particular Africa. I mean here in particular regarding the African Union and the Arab League. Egypt is definitely always there.
Yes, definitely Egypt is always there, always keen to open continuous lines of cooperation with our brotherly Arab nations and also with Africa. Dr. Hossam Allam, researcher in international relations, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Wednesday Debate Live with Taghlit Hussein. Thank you for coming.
Thanks so much for having me. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. That was the daily debate for tonight, and we talked investment in Egypt's foreign relations. Tomorrow, another team. Until then.